Well, welcome back, everybody. This is Stephen Howard hosting discussions on great leadership. I have a fascinating guest with me today, Anna Liebel, who runs a podcast called Genius Leadership, Overcoming Everything. And as we come out of the lockdown, the pandemic, I think we all need to overcome everything. But let me tell you Anna's background a little bit, because this is absolutely fascinating. She is Ukrainian, born in Uzbekistan. She's lived in Sweden, and she now lives in Iceland with her German husband and her 2-year-old daughter who speaks 4 languages. Is that correct? 4 languages?
Yep, the poor kiddo.
Poor kiddo. Well, amazing. Welcome, Anna. Thanks for joining us on Discussions on Great Leadership.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. I'm excited for this conversation.
I am too. And everyone gets the first question. So here it is. What does great leadership mean to you?
For me, great leadership is about being an enabler. And that means knowing yourself well enough so that you can take yourself out of equation when you need to come there and be fully present for your people. And when you come and you're fully present for your people, you're able to bring the best out of them. And it's not for your advantage or for the advantage of the company even, but it's first and foremost for the advantage and the best of the person, him or herself. So when you're able to do that, and you also stay sustainable yourself with your performance and your leadership, I think that is the great leadership to me.
Great. So if I interpret that right, an enabler would be someone who also focuses on personal development, people development of their people. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, tell us a bit about genius leadership. So we're going to go from great leadership to genius leadership at Overcoming Everything. Why did you start the podcast? What's the podcast all about?
So genius leadership is about leading from your zone of genius. This is the zone where you have the flow of living. You're so aligned with your natural gifts, your values, the purpose that you want to build for your life and the legacy that you want to leave behind yourself, that you stay stable, let's say that way, and you are strong within yourself and you feel empowered no matter what kind of situations you're going through. And to find this genius leadership, I'm bringing people from all walks of life who are somehow related to business, most often business environment, because that's my background, that's most of my audience. But sometimes I bring people who are very different, maybe some activists and so on, if I feel like they can actually open up another aspect of how to get into your zone of genius and how to lead from that for my audience.
Now, can anyone get into the zone of leadership genius, the zone of genius, or is it just CEOs and top level leaders?
No, I always talk about leadership as being 3-dimensional, and that's being leading in the dimension of one to many. So when you're leading a whole team or a group of people at the same time, the dimension of one to one, when you're building relationships with one person at a time, and the dimension of one, which is leading yourself, self-leadership. And if you think about it that way, then everyone is the leader. Everyone is leading ourselves, so we are the leaders of our own life, but also we have one-to-one relationships. Even if we don't work with a group of people, we have relationships with our partners, with our parents, with our friends, with our kids, and we can lead in those relationships in the dimension of one-to-one.
As we come out of the pandemic, and how do we get into the zone of genius, and what new skills might we need as leaders to develop to get into the zone and stay in the zone?
To me, it's mostly about learning about yourself and knowing yourself. Because I feel like quite often miscommunications, the lack of, or the expectation management or lack of thereof, and those kind of issues that we have as leaders with our teams are coming from us not being clear about ourselves, or are coming from us not having enough time to react in the way that would feel aligned to ourselves. And by continuously learning yourself, just as you just mentioned, Stephen, before, you caught it from my first answer, that it's about personal development or self-leadership. If you're continuously working on that dimension of yourself, you have this time to react in a way that you feel is healthy to you, to the people whom you're leading, to your relationship with them. So I think this would be one of the most important things for the leaders coming out of the pandemic to really start investing, if they haven't started doing it yet, investing in knowing themselves. It can be through the self-help books. You have written over 2 dozens or over 20 books on that. So just going through those books, but not only going and reading them and just swallowing every book one after another, but doing the work,
Yes.
getting practical with it. That is the very important part of this leadership towards the genius leadership journey. And quite often, getting to implement things is the most difficult part, right, of the book, or getting the value from the book. So it's good to get someone who can hold you accountable. Maybe find another leader within your organization. Maybe it could be your spouse or a friend of yours, but set up times for that person and set up some expectations to help each other, to support each other on that way, and to check in with each other. Hey, have you done this practice, or how have you practiced this skill today in your work, in your leadership? So I think we really need to start focusing on ourselves so much. And it partly comes from me seeing my clients and my broader audience being high performers, and they are very passionate leaders. They want to put a lot of effort, and they do it. They put a lot of effort, energy, and time into their employees, but they forget about themselves. And that is a very unhealthy pattern. That's very bad example that we set for our people. We come from the best intentions, but we're hurting ourselves, our health, our relationships, but we're also hurting our people by showing them that, like, yeah, of course, I want you to go and take vacation, but I'm not going to do it. I haven't taken vacation for 5 years. And then your people go on a vacation, but in the back of their mind, they're thinking about it like, oh, yeah, it's not okay to take it. It's not okay to rest.
That's great, Anna, because that echoes one of my key philosophies of leadership. And I believe that the best two-word phrase ever written in human history is at the top of the Temple of Apollo in Greece. And it says, know thyself. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Start with knowing yourself. And then leadership becomes a continuous learning journey. And leadership is a skill. I think you would echo that. Leadership is a skill. A skill can be practiced, it can be learned, it can be enhanced. You can do better at it. Other than knowing yourself, what other skills do you think leaders need now? We're just at the halfway point of 2021. What particularly male leaders, what skills do male leaders need coming out of the pandemic?
I would say vulnerability and empathy.
Mhm.
And that has been on discussion a lot, right? That the modern leadership requires those skills or those characteristics of a leader. And just you asked, Stephen, about particularly male leaders. And I meet a lot of male leaders who are great leaders, but they know they can reach the next level, and they know, or they hear that, okay, you need to be empathetic, you need to be vulnerable to show that you're also human to your people and open up for success, but also for the failure and for trial through your own example. But a lot of men are struggling with that because they've never been taught how to be vulnerable, how to talk about your negative emotions, for example, when you're scared, when you're unsure, and so on and so forth. So this is something that we really need to embrace now and really allow leaders to try their way towards being empathetic and vulnerable. And that is what I'm doing with my work. I'm opening up and creating that safe space for leaders to start exploring that, where there is no judgment, when there is no effect on their career or their business. Anyhow, the space where they can really explore how is it to actually feel your feelings, and how can you start talking about them, and also how can you start learning to see or try to understand the feelings of the others.
You're saying it's okay for me as a male to be anxious, have anxiety, to be uncertain, to not know all the answers. Is that okay in today's world?
Don't tell anyone.
Do you think this is going to be an organizational issue, though? In all seriousness, is it a corporate climate that has to change, or do men have to change, or both?
Oh, it's a both. It's of course a both. I chose to work with the top leaders in organizations because I believe that that will create ripple effects. We are having so much work on the organizational culture, but if the person who everyone is looking up to in the company can't do those things, can't be empathetic, can't talk about their failures openly and say, hey, this is what I failed at and this is what I learned from that, then everyone else don't get the permission to do those things either. So this is the work that has to be done on the individual levels with the leaders within the organizations, or the official leaders, let's say it that way, because leaders can be within, and hopefully there are across the whole organization, right? But then also that's the work that has to be done on organizational level. We need to have the discussion. We need to start creating the forums where we can discuss those things with people, to discuss what's working, what is not working, what can we improve, how can we support our people better.
And the upside of this, from my reading and my research, would be, so I want to hear your opinion, if leaders are more open, transparent, if they admit that I don't have all the answers, let's work on the answers again, doesn't that build trust and credibility in the leader as well?
Absolutely. And people love those leaders. They absolutely love and adore them, and they don't leave them.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
that's the statistics, that 75% of people who decide to leave their job or look for some other opportunity outside of the company usually leave their managers.
Mhm. Yeah. They leave the manager first and then the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, last question then. Talking about leaving, the other research I read recently says that 40 to 60% of employees are thinking about changing jobs after the lockdown, after the pandemic. What can organizations do to reduce that number?
Oh, I wish I had a quick fix for you to say, like, send out this email or shoot this video and voila, everyone is staying. But I think really start with yourself. Think about it. My organization is probably following the statistics. 40 to 60 people, percent of my people want to leave and change. And start analyzing, what could you do better?
Right.
And dig deep into yourself. Those are very uncomfortable discussions to have with yourself. But look at that. Where do you as a leader feel misaligned? Where do you feel like, yes, I'm doing something, but it scratches my soul? It feels wrong.
Hmm.
Because that is what is felt by people. Your people are smart. They see those things. You might be thinking that you're fooling everyone around yourself just because you're suppressing those things and fooling yourself, but people feel it. And that's what they want to get away from. So start with yourself. Take those uncomfortable moments with yourself and start working on them. And when you feel like you start getting some momentum and you feel like you're all ready to open up, start talking about that process of yours. If you are open as a leader, people want to stay with you.
And I was going to say, these are not organizational issues. These are leadership issues. And as we said, people leave leaders first. So it's, when you read those statistics, says 40, 60% of the people are going to leave their organizations. In effect, what it really says, they're going to leave their leaders. And one thing I've been coaching people on is that not only that soul searching, what is crunching your soul, but what are you doing that might be crunching the souls of your people? I had a leader who I would suggest was micromanaging their people. He thought because of remote workers, he needed to be really in touch with them and constantly always looking over, 2 or 3 phone calls a day. What are you working on? And I said, wait a second, would you do that in the office? Oh, no, I don't have time to do that in the office. Well, don't do it, because now you're micromanaging your people. So outstanding, Anna. Great ideas, great tips for our viewers here. Tell us as we wrap up, how can people find your podcast? I think people would love to listen to your podcast on Genius Leadership. Where can they say, and how often do you do the podcast?
I do that every week. So every Wednesday morning, European time, so middle of the night, US or North American time, there is a new episode dropped. And we are on most major platforms: Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify. So, and if you're listening somewhere where we are not yet, just let me know on LinkedIn, for example. Drop me a note and my team will put the podcast on that platform as well.
Excellent. So it's called Genius Leadership, Overcoming Everything.
Correct.
Great. I hope people watch it or listen to it. I hope people watch this and share this interview with you. You've given them some great tips. So if you did like the interview, please hit the like button below. And as always, subscribe to Discussions on Great Leadership so that you know the next time I upload an interview. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you for your great question, Stephen.